Imagine this. Tomorrow, something goes wrong. You lose your job. A relationship ends. A plan you believed in suddenly falls apart. Your phone still contains hundreds of names. People may still like your photos. They may still react to your stories. They may even tell you, "Let me know if you need anything." But when the room becomes quiet, who actually comes through the door? Who calls without being asked? Who notices that something is wrong? Who stays when there is nothing to gain? That is where the Viking idea of friendship begins. Not with popularity. Not with networking. Not with having people around when everything is going well. But with a much harder question. Who still walks toward you when life becomes difficult? Centuries ago, the Old Norse poem known as the Havamal returned again and again to friendship, loyalty, generosity, distrust, and loneliness. The Havamal means the words of the High One. It survives in the medieval manuscript known as the Codex Regius of the Poetic Edda. The manuscript itself comes from the 13th century, although many of the ideas and verses preserved within it are believed to come from an older oral tradition. Traditionally, the wisdom of the poem is spoken in the voice of Odin. But much of the Havamal is not about gods, monsters, or supernatural mysteries. It is surprisingly practical. How should you behave when entering another person's home? When should you speak? When should you remain silent? How should you deal with enemies? How should you protect your reputation? And what does it mean to have a true friend? That question mattered deeply in the Old Norse world. Travel was dangerous. Communities were smaller. Reputation mattered. Hospitality mattered. And the people you trusted could sometimes determine whether you survived a difficult winter, a dangerous journey, or a violent conflict. A trustworthy companion was not simply someone who enjoyed the same things you did. Friendship had consequences. And perhaps that is why the Havamal treats friendship not as something you simply possess, but as something you maintain. Something you practice. Something you repeatedly choose. In stanza 44, in Henry Adams Bellows' translation, the Havamal gives a simple piece of advice. If you have a friend you truly trust, share your thoughts with him. Exchange gifts. And go to find him often. The important part is easy to overlook. Go to find him often. It sounds almost too simple to be wisdom. But maybe that is exactly why it matters. We often imagine true friendship as something permanent. We say, "We haven't spoken in 2 years, but nothing has changed." And sometimes that really is true. Some friendships can survive enormous distances and long periods of silence. But sometimes, that sentence is only something we tell ourselves while a friendship quietly disappears. The Havamal does not describe friendship as a label. It describes movement. You visit. You speak. You give. You return. Friendship lives through repeated contact. In the Viking Age, that might have meant walking or riding a long road to another person's home. Today, the road may be much shorter. It might be a 20-minute drive. A phone call. A voice message. Or a simple text that says, "How are you really doing?" The technology has changed. The responsibility has not. Other passages in the Havamal speak about giving between friends. A friend gives to a friend. Generosity is answered with generosity. But this should not be understood as accounting. Friendship is not, "I bought dinner last time, so now you owe me." That is a transaction. Reciprocity means something deeper. It means the relationship moves in both directions. One person cannot always make the call. One person cannot always apologize first. One person cannot always listen. One person cannot always travel. One person cannot always carry the friendship. Of course, real life is never perfectly balanced. Sometimes your friend may be grieving. Sometimes they may be struggling financially. Sometimes they may be exhausted. Sometimes they simply have nothing left to give. And during those seasons, you may carry more. That is part of friendship too. But over time, there should be evidence of mutual care. Not identical effort. Mutual effort. The Havamal also contains one of the most human observations about companionship. The speaker describes wandering alone and feeling rich after finding another person. Think about that. He did not find gold. He did not find land. He did not gain status. He found companionship. And suddenly, he felt richer. Modern life gives us endless ways to appear connected while quietly becoming isolated. You can know what someone ate for breakfast without knowing what keeps them awake at night. You can watch a friend travel across the world through a screen without hearing their voice for 6 months. You can have thousands of followers and still have nobody you would call at 2 in the morning. The Havamal suggests a much harsher measurement of friendship. Not how many people know your name, but with whom can you share your mind? Who can hear about your success without becoming bitter? Who can hear about your failure without secretly enjoying it? Who can sit beside you when there is nothing entertaining to say? And perhaps most importantly, for whom are you willing to become that person? Everyone wants a true friend. Far fewer people ask whether they have learned how to be one. So how can we turn this ancient idea into something practical? Here is one simple example. Think of one person you consider a real friend. Not 10 people. Just one. Now imagine that person sends you a message on a Wednesday evening. They say, "Rough day. Can we talk?" The modern habit is to answer, "Of course. Anytime." Then we continue with our own lives. Instead, try something different. Call it the 30-minute rule. Within the next 24 hours, create 30 uninterrupted minutes for that person. Call them. Meet them. Take a walk together. Sit somewhere quiet. And put your phone away. Do not immediately tell them what they should do. Do not turn their problem into a story about yourself. Start with a simple question. What happened? Then ask, what part of this is hardest? And before the conversation ends, ask one more question. What do you need from me right now? Advice? Help? Or just someone to listen? Then do something even more important. Come back. 2 or 3 days later. Send another message. Ask how they are doing. Remember what they told you. Not because an app reminded you. Not because you want credit. Because you remembered. That is what the ancient advice, go to find him often, can look like in modern life. Friendship is not proven only by one emotional conversation. It is proven by return. You came back. But there is another part of true friendship that is less comfortable. A true friend does not always comfort you. Sometimes, a true friend has to stop you. Imagine you are about to make a terrible decision. You are angry. Your pride has been wounded. You want revenge. You want to send the message. Quit the job immediately. End a relationship in anger. Humiliate someone publicly. A false friend may encourage you. Not because it is good for you, but because the drama is entertaining. A true friend may do something much harder. They may say, "No. This is not who you want to become." They risk your irritation. They risk losing your approval. Because protecting your judgment matters more to them than keeping you comfortable. That is an expensive form of loyalty. The best friend is not the person who helps you justify every impulse. The best friend is someone whose presence makes you less likely to betray your own standards. And this brings us to our channel's perspective. Here is how we see true friendship. A true friend is someone who remembers who you are. When you temporarily forget. When success makes you arrogant. They remember the person you were before anyone applauded. When failure makes you ashamed. They remember what you have survived. When anger makes you reckless. They remember your values. When fear makes you feel small. They remember your courage. And friendship asks you to do the same for them. A true friend carries a version of your story that is larger than your current mood. They do not freeze you at your worst moment. And they do not worship you at your best. They remember the whole person. Perhaps that is one of the greatest gifts one human being can give another. An honest memory of who you are. There is also a quiet tragedy in many adult friendships. Nobody betrayed anyone. Nobody had a great argument. Nobody decided to become enemies. They simply stopped walking the road. One person became busy. Then the other. 1 month became 6 months. 6 months became 3 years. And eventually, the friendship survived only as a memory. The advice of the Havamal is almost embarrassingly ordinary. Go see your friend. Do not wait for the perfect weekend. Do not wait until work becomes easier. Do not wait until life slows down. Life may never slow down. Make the call. Send the invitation. Bring the meal. Show up after the funeral. When everyone else has already gone home. Help carry the boxes. Sit through the bad season. Celebrate the good season. Without envy. True friendship is built from acts that seem small in isolation, but become enormous when repeated over a lifetime. A good friend does not simply make life more pleasant. A good friend changes what kind of life is possible. You become harder to isolate. Harder to deceive. Harder to break. Not because your friend fights every battle for you, but because you no longer have to walk every road alone. So for a moment, forget the word friend as a social category. Forget follower counts. Forget contacts. Forget likes. Think instead about roads. Whose door can you still walk toward? Without pretending. Who can walk toward yours? Who knows your mind? Who tells you the truth? Who returns? And whose life becomes a little less lonely? Because you return too. The Vikings lived in another world. But this part of the human condition has changed very little. We still need people we can trust. And trust still grows through what we repeatedly do. And before you go, one simple question. What matters more in a true friend? Loyalty or honesty?